Number 3. Pishon. Pishon was born in July 1959. He was the second of 3 boys, and his family moved all around the world because his father was a member of the military police. In 1980, Pishon joined the army. He was sent to Korea, where, like his father, he served in the military police. His enlistment came to an end in 1984, and he decided to apply for the job that he had always wanted. He had always dreamed of being a police officer. Not long after he ended his enlistment, he got a job with the police department in Concord, New Hampshire. But tragically, after 10 years of service, Pishon had to retire from the police force because he had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. At the age of 35, he had lost the job that he wanted his whole life. After he retired, he moved from dead-end job to dead-end job. Pishon had gone to rehab for alcoholism when he was on the police force, and after he retired, he drank even more. He even lost a job as a security guard because he showed up to work drunk. In 1998, he got a job as a security guard with Reliable Security Guard Agency. He was sent to work at a factory that made plastic automotive parts in Seabrook, New Hampshire. The factory employed about 100 people, and it ran 24 hours a day. Pishon was the security guard on the 3rd shift, which was 9:30 p.m. to 5:30 in the morning. He worked alone, and he didn't have a weapon. Usually, when he was done work, he'd pick up a 12-pack of beer, and he'd go to a nearby hotel where he lived. He was considered a loner, but the hotel manager and people at the factory said that he was friendly. While he had been depressed after he left the police force, in the summer of 2000, he seemed to be in good spirits. He mentioned to a few people that he was looking forward to going on a family vacation later in the summer, and he planned on buying a new car. On July 4th, 2000, Pishon showed up for work, and no one noticed anything unusual about him. It was a quiet night at the factory because it was shutdown week and a lot of people were on vacation. Only about 12 people were working at the factory that night. Pishon's supervisor checked in on him at about midnight, and he seemed fine. Then, at 1:42 a.m., Pishon called the fire department. His car was on fire. When the fire department arrived, they put out the fire, but it was too late for the car. The car, and everything inside of it, had been destroyed. Pishon told the fire department that he was in the guard shack, which was beside his car, and then suddenly, he saw some smoke. He looked for the source of the smoke, and he realized that his car was on fire. He went and found a fire extinguisher. He tried to put the fire out himself, but he couldn't. The fire department saw evidence that Pishon had tried to use the fire extinguisher. One thing that the firefighters noted was that Pishon acted calmly, despite the fact that he had lost his car and all of his possessions inside of it. At 3:20 a.m., Pishon's supervisor checked on him, and he thought that Pishon was okay, so he left him to finish his shift. About 25 minutes later, a factory worker noticed that Pishon was missing. They searched around the factory for him, but he was nowhere to be found. So they contacted his family. His family thought the worst. A few months earlier, Pishon had purchased a handgun from his father. Pishon had talked about suicide in the past, and he said if he were to do it, he would shoot himself in the head. When they went to the hotel room that he called home, they were expecting to find him dead by his own hand. But they didn't. He was not in the room, and they found the handgun in the same brown paper bag that his father gave it to him in. Another theory as to what happened to Pishon is that he fell into the salt marshes that were near the factory and he drowned. He possibly accidentally fell in while he was walking home, or he was pushed in, or he chose to drown himself. But the police said if he drowned in the salt marshes, his body would have surfaced and they would have found some trace of him. Since Pishon's body has never been found, his family is not convinced that he died by suicide. Another theory is that Pishon had a mental breakdown or he wanted to escape his life. It is thought he may have torched his own car as a way to liberate himself, and then he just walked away from the factory and his life. Pishon's family said he had a habit of keeping his most prized possessions in his car. So they were surprised to learn that he was calm as he watched his car burn. The fire department determined that the fire that destroyed Pishon's car was an act of arson. What is odd is that his car was set on fire while it was parked right beside the guard shack where he was supposedly sitting when the fire started. Yet, he didn't tell anyone that he saw someone torch his car. So it's plausible that he could have set the fire as a way to free himself of his car and his possessions so that he could start a new life. Pishon's family doesn't believe he walked away from the factory because his multiple sclerosis made it difficult to even walk short distances. There were no trucks that left the factory that night, so he didn't hitch a ride that way. Also, there were no taxis called out to the factory that night. The guard shack was not close to the road, so his family doubts that he would have walked out to the road to hitchhike in the middle of the night. When Pishon disappeared, he left his cigarettes and his contact solution in the guard shack. His family thinks that if he chose to walk away on his own, he would have taken those items with him. Also, in the years since he went missing, there has been no activity on his bank accounts, credit cards, or social security number. Another possibility is that Pishon was a victim of foul play. Pishon told his parents that he had some run-ins with a few factory workers. One factory worker had threatened to kill him after he gave the worker a parking ticket. Pishon had also mentioned to his parents that he saw drug deals going down in the parking lot. Another worry that Pishon had revolved around his romantic feelings towards a Hispanic woman who worked at the factory. He was worried that his feelings would make her friends angry at him. At about midnight on the night he disappeared, Pishon's supervisor checked in on him. The supervisor then stopped at a variety store near the factory. In the parking lot of the variety store, he noticed 2 carloads of Hispanic people, and he said they were acting rowdy. However, it's not clear if those 2 cars were connected to Pishon's disappearance. Another possibility is that Pishon saw something that he shouldn't have seen. On the same night that he disappeared, a door and 2 vending machines at the factory had been damaged with a forklift. The theory is that Pishon's car was set on fire as a distraction, and someone, or several people, used the forklift to steal money from the vending machine. Pishon caught him, or them, and there was a struggle. In the struggle, Pishon could have been killed or mortally wounded, and his body was taken away from the factory. They may have not intended to kill Pishon when they attacked him, but he ended up dead nevertheless. Another possibility is that Pishon was kidnapped and killed elsewhere. The theory that Pishon was taken away from the factory either dead or against his will, is bolstered by an eyewitness account. A factory worker saw two cars speed away from the factory around the time that another factory worker noticed that Pishon was missing. Unfortunately, the police have very little physical evidence in the case, and they think that any of the theories are plausible. Unless Curtis Pishon is found, dead or alive, or someone comes forward with information about his disappearance, his family may never know what happened to him. Number 2. The Thornton Fires. At the end of the 1970s, Thornton, which is about 10 miles from downtown Denver, Colorado, had a population of around 48,000 people. Starting in May 1979, the city was plagued by a series of mysterious fires. The first fire happened in the Valley View Estates trailer park. A vacant mobile home caught fire and it burned down to its shell. 6 months later, the Valley View Estates clubhouse caught on fire. By October 1982, about 3.5 years after the first fire, there had been a total of 20 fires. Half of those fires were started in mobile homes. At least 3 of those fires happened in the Valley View Estates trailer park. On October 20th, 1982, Gary Nutzman had his 2 sons from his second marriage staying with him in his trailer in Valley View Estates. Also in the mobile home was his second wife and her 2 children. Gary was sleeping at the front of the trailer with his sons, 4-year-old David and 1-year-old Michael. His wife, Catherine, was sleeping in a bedroom with her 8-year-old daughter, Jennifer Dodson, at the back of the 64-foot trailer. Catherine's son, 10-year-old Timothy Dodson, was sleeping in a bedroom near the middle of the trailer. At 3:20 a.m., something stirred Gary from sleep, and he went into the living room, which was in the middle of the mobile home. He was shocked to see that the living room was on fire. He went to the back of the trailer and woke up Catherine and Jennifer. Gary then went back to get the boys, but the fire was too intense. He was forced out the back door where Catherine and Jennifer were waiting. But unfortunately, the 3 boys were still inside. Gary tried to get in through the front door, but it was locked. He then broke a window in an effort to get into the mobile home, but the smoke was too intense, so he couldn't climb in. A neighbor tried to get into the mobile home through a side door, but once again, the smoke was too intense. The fire department arrived a few minutes after the fire was discovered. Firefighters had to hold back Gary and Catherine because they kept trying to get into the trailer. A firefighter tried to get in to save the boys, but he was burned and had to seek treatment. Gary also had to be treated for burns and smoke inhalation. After the fire was put out, the bodies of 10-year-old Timothy, 4-year-old David, and 1-year-old Michael were found inside. The medical examiner determined that all 3 died from smoke inhalation. At first, the fire department thought it was just a tragic accident. Gary said they were having problems with the furnace, so they turned it off and they were using 2 space heaters. They thought that the space heaters overloaded the circuits and this started the fire. But then days later, detectives with the Thornton Police Department announced that the fire was an act of arson. They said they were investigating the deaths of the 3 boys as homicides. The police said that they had several suspects, and they even gave 2 people lie detector tests. But no arrests were made, and the fires continued. In the winter of 1984, Susan Tier lived in a mobile home in the Redwood Estates Mobile Home Park with her boyfriend, Dennis Engen, and her two daughters, 8-year-old Cheryl Morehouse and 3-year-old Skyanne Morehouse. Their home was only about a half a mile away from where the 3 boys were killed 26 months earlier. In the early morning of December 15, 1984, a fire broke out in the living room of their mobile home. Susan and David were awoken by the fire. Susan's daughters were sleeping at the other end of the trailer, and to get to the girls, they had to pass through the living room. By the time they got to the living room, it was engulfed in flames, making it impossible for them to get to the girls' bedroom. Susan and David were able to get out of the trailer, and they went to try to get the girls out through a window. But the fire was too intense when they got to that end of the trailer. Susan could hear her daughter screaming, "Mama," from inside the trailer, but there was no way she could get to them. Susan was interviewed in 2013, 29 years after the fire, and she said she was still haunted by their screams. An investigation of the fire was conducted. One of the investigators was the leading expert in trailer fires. One investigator told Susan that they found residue from 3 fire accelerants on the floor. One was an industrial spot remover solvent that was used by dry cleaning businesses. The second was lighter fluid, and the third accelerant couldn't be identified. Even with 5 children dead, the fires didn't stop. A month after Cheryl and Skyanne were killed, at 3:45 a.m. on January 25, 1985, there was another trailer fire in the same trailer park where the girls lived. The family of 5 who lived in the trailer managed to get out of the home safely. The rash of mysterious fires finally came to an end not long after that fire. In 6 years, there were 40 mysterious fires in Thornton. Half of them happened in trailer parks. Many of those were just in 2 trailer parks, the Valley View Estates Trailer Park, where Timothy, David, and Michael were killed, and the Redwood Estates Mobile Home Park, where Cheryl and Skyanne were killed. The police were confident that all the fires, or at least most of them, were started by a single serial arsonist. A detective who worked on the case said that the arsonist was probably a compulsive fire setter, and he may have had something against mobile homes. The police said that he entered the homes he torched through unlocked doors in the early morning hours when the occupants were still asleep. Once he was inside, he poured an accelerant, like kerosene, and then set the fire. Or sometimes, if he couldn't get inside the trailer, he set the porch on fire. No arrests were made, and once the fires died down, the cases went cold. In 2012, Susan Tier, who lost her daughters Cheryl and Skyanne 28 years earlier, asked the police to re-examine the case. They said they wanted to, but they had a problem. The investigative reports had gone missing, and key evidence had been destroyed. Susan gave them some of the reports that she was given in the 1980s. The reports were given to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, which is better known by its acronym, the CBI. The CBI reviewed the reports and photos of the burnt-out trailer. They also had fire experts look at the photographs of the burnt remnants. After investigating for a few weeks, the CBI released a report. The report said they could not determine the cause or the origin of the fire, but they found no evidence that it had been intentionally set. Instead, they think it was most likely a tragic accident. Susan had a wood-burning stove in her mobile home. The report theorized that the flue, which is a duct for smoke and waste gases, had been installed improperly. Susan and her boyfriend were smokers, and the report said that one of them may have dropped a burning cigarette butt into the stove, and this started the fire. The CBI laboratory reported that there was no evidence of an accelerant. Finally, the report said that since the 1980s, experts' knowledge of fires has improved dramatically. For example, experts now know that there are accelerants in flooring and furniture. So what may have been ruled arson back in the 1980s would not be classified as arson today. Susan was highly critical of the report. She thinks that the case was just swept under the rug because they were tired of hearing from her. She wanted to know how the CBI laboratory could be confident that there were no accelerants used, considering that the reports had been lost and evidence had been destroyed. She also pointed out that the CBI didn't interview any witnesses. When Susan's neighbors were interviewed in the days after the fire, one neighbor said that he saw a fireball that traveled from the middle of the mobile home to the front. What he most likely saw was a flash fire, and this is a common indication that an accelerant was involved in a fire. The CBI responded to Susan's criticism by saying that the fire may have been arson, but that would be difficult to prove. The CBI did not comment on the other 39 mysterious fires that happened in Thornton between 1979 and 1985. If there was a serial arsonist, he or she has never been identified, and the police have no suspects. Number 1. The Our Lady of the Angels School Fire. Our Lady of the Angels School first opened its doors in 1904 in the Humboldt section of Chicago, Illinois. 54 years later, about 1,600 students were attending the Catholic elementary school. December 1st, 1958 was a clear, cold day in the Windy City. For the most part, it had been a normal day for the staff and the students at the school. As the school day was drawing to a close, a fire broke out in a cardboard trash barrel in the basement of the northeast stairwell. No one noticed the fire, and as it started to smolder, the heat increased in the stairwell. Eventually, the heat got to be so intense that it broke a window. More oxygen poured into the stairwell, and this caused the fire to spread. After the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, fire codes were introduced that mandated that the exterior of buildings needed to be brick so that a fire wouldn't spread from building to building. Our Lady of the Angels School had a brick exterior, but the interior was mostly wood and plaster. The wooden stairwell burned out of control, and no one noticed. 2 teachers noticed that it had gotten warmer, but they didn't assume that there was a fire. The school's custodian was the first person to realize that the school was on fire. Then a traveling salesman driving by the school noticed the flames. He went to a home that was across the road from the school, and he told the woman who lived there to call for help. About 8 minutes after the janitor saw the flames, the fire alarm in the school was activated. The alarm was an internal one only, and it did not alert the fire department. By the time the alarm was activated, the blaze was out of control. Unfortunately, the fire had blocked off the only exit for several classrooms on the second floor. Some staff and students decided to jump out the second-story windows. It was a 25-foot drop. It was concrete or crushed rock below the windows. Sadly, several students did not survive the fall. Many children waited in their classroom for the fire department to save them. The fire department arrived about 4 minutes after they were called. By this point, it suspected that the fire had been burning for over a half an hour. As they started to put out the fire, they pulled children out of the second-story windows. The firefighters noticed that the students' white shirts had turned brown. As they were rescuing some of the children from the second floor, there was a flashover, and then part of the roof collapsed. Several students were killed instantly. About an hour after the fire department arrived, the fire was finally under control, and firefighters entered the building to look for survivors. Unfortunately, by that point, there weren't many. In total, 92 children and 3 nuns were killed. Many more were injured. 11 students and 1 nun needed repeated skin grafts. The city of Chicago was shocked and deeply saddened by the tragedy. The fire made headlines across North America, and the Pope sent his condolences from the Vatican. An inquest was conducted, but the cause of the fire could not be determined. Some people thought that someone was smoking in the stairwell, and he or she either threw their match or their lit cigarette butt into the garbage. Many people thought that the fire was intentionally set. But this is only speculation, and there is no definitive answer as to what started the fire. 3 years after the deadly blaze, there was an odd twist in the case. Cicero is a suburb of Chicago, and on October 26, 1961, their fire department received an anonymous handwritten letter. The letter blamed a 13-year-old boy for a fire that happened in an apartment building in Cicero 2 days earlier. The boy was named in the letter, but his name has never been made public. The fire in the apartment building was started when someone set a newspaper on fire in the stairwell of the building. The fire was discovered not long after it was started, and it was extinguished before it caused too much damage. The day after that fire was set, and the day before the fire department received the letter, there was a second fire that was very similar to the first one mentioned in the letter. It was also started by someone who set a newspaper on fire in the stairwell of an apartment building. The police interviewed people who lived near the building where the second fire was started. One of the people they interviewed was a woman who lived across the road from the building. She said that around the time of the fire, she was talking to the boy who was named in the letter. He was a paper boy, and he had come to her home to collect money for the newspaper delivery. The boy asked the woman if his jacket smelled like smoke. He then told her that there was a fire, and he pointed at the apartment building across the road. The woman didn't see any flames, but it was the building where the fire had been set. The boy told her that she should call for help. When the boy left, the woman found 2 books of matches and a box of matches in her doorway. She knew the matches weren't there before the boy came to pick up the newspaper money. Detectives went to the boy's school and pulled him out of class. The boy said he was expecting the police would want to talk to him. They asked him why, and he said it was because he told the firefighters at the second fire that he was the one who noticed the fire. They told him he probably saved a lot of lives. The detectives asked the boy if he carried matches with him, and he said no. The detectives made him empty his pockets, and it turned out he was carrying several matchbooks. Then they asked him if he had ever been in trouble with the police. He said he got in trouble with the police one time when he was living in Chicago. He said he had tried to derail a train, but a police officer saw him and he ran away. The officer caught him, but he wasn't charged with anything. The police decided to bring the boy to the police station, and they called his 28-year-old mother and told her to meet them there. At the police station, the detectives asked the boy if he started the fire that was mentioned in the letter and the fire that happened the next day. At first, he denied setting both fires. The boy had told the police that when he did something wrong, his mother and stepfather would beat him. One time, his stepfather caught him playing with matches, and he made him hold his hand over a hot burner. The detectives thought that he was scared of being punished by his mother and stepfather, and that's why he denied setting the two fires. So they pressed him, and he admitted to starting those fires, plus several others around Cicero. He said he liked to play with matches, and he got excited by the sound of sirens on the fire trucks. When his mother arrived at the police station, she seemed unsurprised that he was there for starting fires. The boy was then released into his mother's custody, and she was told to keep an eye on him. Less than 3 weeks later, the boy started another fire. He was doing his paper route with his mother. He slipped away from her for a few minutes and started a fire in an apartment building. A 72-year-old woman had to be taken to the hospital for smoke inhalation. The boy said he started the fire because a kid who bullied him at school lived in the building. Once again, the police released the boy into his mother's custody without charging him with anything. After this fire, the police looked into the boy's background. They learned that he was smart, but he was a troublemaker. He and his family had moved to Cicero in 1960. Before they moved there, they lived in Chicago. Then the detectives found out that the boy attended Our Lady of the Angels School when the fire broke out. He was 10 years old, and he was in the 5th grade. After learning that, they began to think that the boy may have started the school fire. About a month after the last fire in Cicero, the Cicero Fire Department was called to the boy's apartment building. A fire had broken out in the basement. The basement was damaged, and the rest of the building was filled with smoke. The boy denied setting the fire. 9 days later, on December 30th, 1961, there was a fire at a bowling alley that was a block and a half away from the boy's home. 4 men were killed in the blaze. One of the men lived with the boy's family as a boarder. The boy was interviewed, and he denied setting the bowling alley fire. On January 9, 1962, investigators from Chicago joined Cicero detectives in interviewing the boy. He told them he started his first fire at the age of 5. He set a neighbor's garage on fire using a can of spray paint and a match. Then the investigators asked him about the Our Lady of the Angels fire. He said he was in class when the fire started, and he escaped the school when his teacher pushed him out the window. He said he belly flopped on the fireman's net. But the investigators had asked his teacher about the fire, and she said she led her students down the stairs, and none of them went out a window. The teacher said she couldn't remember where the boy was before the fire started, but she said she remembered leading him out of the school. She said she remembered him because he was a mischievous boy, and she always kept him at the front of the classroom. The investigator suggested to the boy's mother and stepfather that he should take a polygraph test. They agreed, but they decided to pay for the polygraph exam themselves. They wanted the results to be confidential. They just wanted to know for themselves if the boy started the fire that killed 95 people. During the polygraph examination, the boy was questioned about the Our Lady of the Angels fire, and he said he wasn't involved. The polygraph administrator noted that he was being deceptive, so he confronted the boy about his deception. At first, the boy said that his friend started the fire, but upon further questioning, he admitted to starting the fire. He said he had asked to go to the washroom. Instead of going to the washroom, he went to the basement of the stairwell and started the fire. He then returned to his classroom on the second floor. When the boy admitted to starting the fire, the polygraph examination was stopped. The boy then gave an 8-page confession and he signed it. The boy's mother and stepfather had paid for the polygraph exam, and the administrator was supposed to keep the results confidential. But the results leaked to the police and the Chicago Tribune. On January 17, 1962, the boy surrendered himself to the police in Cicero. He was charged with setting 3 fires in Cicero. He wasn't charged with the school fire because he was 10 at the time of the blaze, and no one under the age of 13 could face criminal charges in Illinois. However, at his trial, the judge was to decide if he should face charges for the Our Lady of the Angels fire. The boy went to trial in family court in February 1962. He pleaded not guilty to setting the fires in Cicero. During the trial, he recanted his confession regarding the school fire. He said he had been coerced into confessing. The judge ultimately ruled that the boy was guilty of setting the 3 fires in Cicero. The judge then decided that the boy should never face trial regarding the Our Lady of the Angels school fire. For setting the 3 fires in Cicero, the boy was sent to a boarding school in Michigan that focuses on psychiatric help. He was released in 1965, about 3 years after he went to the school. He then joined the Army, and he served in Vietnam. He spent 2 years in Vietnam, and then he was discharged. He moved to the western United States, and he worked as a trucker. When he was interviewed as an adult, he denied setting the school on fire. The identity of the boy has never been made public. If he is still alive, at the time of this video, he would be about 70 years old. In 1959, the ruins of the burnt-out school were demolished. A new school, also called Our Lady of the Angels, was built on the same site, and it opened in 1960. The school remained in operation for 39 years, and then it closed its doors in 1999. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Hopefully you found it interesting. If you did, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos just like it. Also, please go to criminallylisted.com where you can suggest cases, buy merch, and find out about an exclusive podcast. Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching.